What's up everyone, and thanks for joining me again this week. This week's video is a submission for this month's T-SQL Tuesday number 119 hosted by Alex Yates. If you're not familiar with T-SQL Tuesday, it's a monthly prompt for the SQL Server community to discuss and share ideas about various professional and technical topics. And this month's topic is about what in your career you have changed your mind about. So in my first few years as a developer, I thought that to be a great programmer, you needed to learn all of the latest techniques and understand the best design practices and know how to use the trendiest tools, right? If you knew all those technical skills, that is how you would achieve programmer stardom. And because of that, I spent a lot of my earlier parts of my career really focusing on those technical skills, trying to really learn the tools that I knew, because that's what I thought was most important. And while I don't regret the time I spent really challenging myself technically and learning those topics, over time, I've kind of changed my views about that being the only thing that matters when it comes to being a good programmer, right? Now, more than anything else, I think communication is just as important, if not sometimes more important, to becoming a good programmer than just those technical skills. And so today's video is about why I think those communication skills are so important and some of my recommendations on how to improve your communication skills. And so to start off, I've noticed three major improvements I've made by focusing some of my learning time on communication skills rather than those, technical skills. And the first thing is that you can get your ideas communicated clearly the first time around. Nothing is worse than spending a bunch of time talking about requirements and trying to understand different things and starting to write some proof of concept code, only to find out that all that work is basically throwaway because you didn't understand or you didn't convey your intentions originally from the get-go. So not only does it waste valuable time, but it can also create problems of frustration amongst your team members or even resentment, right? If they're on the receiving end of this, right? If you communicated poorly and they ended up doing a bunch of work that turns out wasn't necessary. Secondly, if you learn to communicate clearly, you have a much better chance of leaving people feeling good. What I mean about this is unclear communication or lack of communication altogether causes a lot of problems. Your team members may not know what to expect of you or if you're going to hold up their part of the project. Your manager may not know if the project's going to be delayed on time or if you're meeting all your customers' needs. And your customers, frankly, if they don't have communication from you when there are things like problems or things that they were expecting to work, they may not value your product and may not think it's stable enough to use. So instead of leaving things unclear, it's much better to be proactive and communicate clearly and communicate often, so that everyone kind of has an idea of where you are and what's going on, and that way there's no doubt left in anyone's mind about how things are going. And finally, if those first two reasons weren't enough, if you communicate clearly, you will get your needs met much quicker. See, once you learn what it feels like to be very assertive and proactive about your communications and being able to communicate clearly the first time and kind of eliminate any questions of doubt from people's minds, you'll start to notice when other people are not communicating effectively with you. Once you start recognizing that, you'll be able to recognize potential future problems much earlier on and be able to solve them immediately just by asking the appropriate follow-up question or reframing something that you said to ensure that the people you're working with and talking with understand your needs. Overall, it's going to help you get your projects done faster because you're going to get what you need sooner, and there's going to be less of this back and forth miscommunication about things that weren't clearly stated the first time. All right, so it took me a long time to kind of learn all those things, and I'm not an expert by any means. Communication is still something I work on a regular basis, but I do have three recommendations that I wish I kind of knew earlier on in my career that I think made a big impact on how effectively I work. So the first recommendation is to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Not only from like an empathetic standpoint of trying to understand what they need, how they feel, but especially for something like, for example, emails. If you're writing an email to a group of people, if you want to ensure that what you're saying, what you're writing is clear, reread that email as if it was being read by all the different people that you're sending it to. Different people with different backgrounds and different contexts about what you're talking about may interpret your email differently. You'll be doing yourself a huge favor if you can edit your message so that it is clear to all the different people in context, right, that are going to be reading it, so that everyone's on the same page once they do read it and there's none of these miscommunication issues to deal with later on. Second recommendation is to keep communication concise, and this is something that I still struggle with all the time. Speaking with others in a work setting where you need to get things accomplished, you want to try to be concise and precise with your words. Both when speaking and emailing others or communicating right through messages, you want to be concise because it'll improve your chances that the other person will understand what you're trying to say. And if you're too concise with your message to the other person, at the very least, hopefully it'll trigger them to say, hey, I still don't know, as opposed to you going on and explaining things in a very vague way, and the other person may think they know what you need, but in reality, they don't know. They were just confused. So try to be concise, edit your messages, and keep things short. Finally, follow up on your communications. People are busy. You're not always necessarily their highest priority, so sometimes you just have to follow up on a message to keep things going. If you communicated clearly from the get-go, right, you did all these things about keeping things concise and editing your message, then it's really easy to follow up because someone probably just missed whatever you needed. It's not that they're confused about what they need to give to you, they just forgot. On the other hand, if your communication wasn't clear, someone may not be responding to you because they just don't know what to do. In that case, it's pretty easy just to say, let me re-clarify this. I don't think I did a good job of explaining what I need, and follow up that way. If you want to have people respond to your messages, you need to make it as simple as possible for them to do so. Sending an unclear message will just leave your reader with questions, and it's more likely that they'll just ignore or forget that they actually had to respond back to you. And while technical skills are very important, and that's why I focus on them in most of my videos, it's also really important to get those communication skills beefed up as well. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, and honestly, it just takes a lot of practice to get used to writing things concisely and following up and being clear in your speech and your text. But if you do make an effort to practice and improve your communication to communicate clearly and effectively, you'll notice how much better your whole career, right, as a developer or as an administrator will become. And so that's it for this week. Thank you again for tuning in. If you're not a subscriber, be sure to subscribe so you never miss a weekly video, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.